I work for a company that is a vendor to the government. I have kind of two tracks. One is B2B and one is government opportunities. And the B2B opportunities are very clear about how to identify and what the continuum of, but it's less clear, the government perspective, when you're trying to build a pipeline of opportunities and all you see flying in front of you, RFIs, RFPs, RFQs.
Hey guys, just driving in the 4Runner here and want to introduce today's episode. Craig is feeling overwhelmed. He's in a position where he's working with a company and he's responsible for B2B sales, but he also has to start a pipeline of business to government work, or a federal sales pipeline. So in this episode, I walk through part of our framework with Craig on how he's going to build his pipeline, from first figuring out how many opportunities have to be in there, to targeting agencies that buy what you sell, to finally, how do you actually find the opportunities that you're going to put in the pipeline? Right now, this is just a place to start, but we gave him a lot of great tips, and listening to him at the end of the podcast, I think he has now got a direction. He's got steps he can follow to start building a pipeline, setting up meetings with people in the government, showing the company that he's working for that he's making progress and he knows what he's doing. So whether you're a sales executive building a pipeline, or you're a small business owner looking to build a pipeline that actually makes sense, that actually has a framework where you can win government contracts, this episode is for you. Look, your company can't afford to lose $2.3 million a year in revenue. That's the average that small businesses make selling to the government. And in this economy, when things are fluctuating, you want to have that stable income. So my clients, through DoD Contract Academy, are able to take our process and win government contracts without wasting time and money. Our system's focused, easy to manage, and customized for your business. With the Academy, you're not alone. We have weekly coaching where we can get our eyes on your business. We can answer your questions. So you get the framework and you get to speak with us each week to make sure that you are successful. Now, I believe that this is the best platform that exists in the world for teaching small businesses how to sell to the government. I haven't seen anything like it. And the advice and guidance that we can provide to you and work with you to help you be successful, it's just simply unmatched. And at the price point that DoD Contract Academy is at, I think that it's at least worth giving it a shot, trying it out for a month. All you got to do to get started is join DoD Contract Academy. Go to dodcontract.com to do that. Watch our short, easy to follow training modules, and then put your system in place for winning government contracts. And you're going to work with our team to do that. So hopefully we'll see you there, and let's get into the podcast. All right, guys, welcome to this week's episode of DoD Contract Academy. You may be listening to this at a podcast, you may be watching it in our training or on YouTube, but we have Craig with us today, and I've known Craig for a while now, and he's been on some of our other videos. Craig, how's it going?
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel Howard. Happy to be here.
Oh, thanks. You can call me Rick. All right, so Craig's in an interesting position, and some of you listening may be in the same position. So he has a background in sales, and he's working for a company. We're not going to talk about the company specifically, but he's in a position where he's responsible for regular business-to-business sales, which he's familiar with and has a handle on. But if I understand correctly, now there's also a government line that you're responsible for, so a B2G, or a public sector line. And what we talked about before the call was, all right, how do we, because it's not as straightforward as B2B is in your mind, which you're used to, and this is the case for a lot of people, how do we build a pipeline that actually makes sense for government sales? Is that pretty accurate?
It's just pretty accurate. Yep, correct.
Okay. And we talked to about hey, what are some of the tools that you're going to use? So I think first, you mentioned services. This company is responsible for services. Can you give me an idea a little bit more specifically, without giving away the farm here? What kind of services are we talking about? Like, generally speaking, accounting services, technology, consulting services?
Yeah, consulting services, human capital, I said analytics services,
So like
things
data
that
analytics.
or kind of market assessments,
Okay.
which I guess can roll under data analytics.
Okay. When you say human capital, do you mean more like HR related?
Yeah,
Okay. So advising or consulting on human resources and how to manage all of that.
typically, yeah. I mean, and it's much vaster than that.
I'm sure. Do they provide people? So would you be looking at opportunities where you would be providing, say, 10 people to work full time for a government agency? Or is it more project specific? Like, no, the
It's
government's
more,
looking for.
yeah, more project specific.
Okay, perfect. All right, that helps. So and I want to state that just so we kind of have an idea of what space you're in, right? So before we start looking at tools and things like that, I think just setting a couple parameters up front. And one is, do you have a quota?
No, but I have expectations.
Okay. What do you give me an idea of what realistically you would like to bring in at least the first 2 years?
I'd like to, I mean, if I brought in, $1 million in business in, the first year, that would reflect well upon me.
Okay. And that's pretty doable. And I would say that's pretty standard as far as having a quota in the public sector. Now that would be, by the way, people I know that have a quota of $1 million, 2 million, typically they're not also doing B2B, right? So that's something you might have to work out with your business, but we'll get to that. So one of the parameters I like to set before I even start building the pipeline is, what do I really have to bring in? Because that's going to dictate how I bring in different opportunities and how I build my pipeline. So personally, and I've sold, and I still do for some of my clients, will sell to the government, right? So if I have $1 million quota, I want to 5x that at least to start off with, right? So sure. Meaning I want to have a pipeline of at least $5 million in opportunities, assuming I'm going to close 1 out of every 5. When you're just starting out, it might actually have to be a little bit bigger than that, but I like to do 5x because I think it's reasonable. You don't want to have a pipeline that's so big that you can't reasonably manage all of those opportunities, right? And we'll talk about what's the difference between a good idea, right, that's in your pipeline, and something that's actually something you could potentially close, right? So, but to start off, so we want to know, how can we want to build a pipeline that has at least $5 million in opportunities with the federal government in there, right? So I'm going to share my screen with you here. We're going to talk about a couple tools that we can use to start building it, and maybe some of the things that you should start looking for. Make sense?
Yeah, that would be great, because I mean, like with B2B opportunities, I can prospect, qualify, and stack a pipeline, right, and move that pipeline along the continuum of the sales process relative to their buying desire, but also with some professional salesmanship, I can expedite that, right, potentially.
Yeah.
You can't really expedite that with government contracts.
True. Government contracting is the long game, right? So you're looking, and this is your messaging to the company, and I believe you said they have experience in the government sector, in the public sector.
Yes.
So this isn't going to be new to them, right? So if it was a salesperson listening to this and they were asked to start a government pipeline, they may have a harder job messaging. And the message, by the way, is 12 months to 2 years from start to finish before you see a contract, in your coffers. Now, there are ways to expedite that. If your company is, typically what you're going to do is get a sector to manage within that, right? So they might say, hey, Craig, you're going to manage Navy, or you're going to manage something even more specific like Air Force Research Lab opportunities, or they might say DoD if it's really broad, or Department of Energy. So it is good to have focus, because then you're not going to be scattered all over the place. All right. So, what you're saying about B2B resonates with me. I mean, I sell B2B with my business, right? So those sales, I mean, if I get the right person on the phone, I can make a sale today, right? And that's
Right.
bank. You're right. In the government, that's not going to happen. One way to expedite sales, though, is if you have, current clients in the government that you're on contract with, working with them to sell more is going to be the fastest and best way to win contracts. So we're not going to hit that today, but I would say step one is, sit back with your boss or whoever and say, hey, do I have access? Is somebody already managing these from a sales point of view? Because I should really be talking with the PMs of each of those projects, seeing if they need more. Can they recommend, other agencies or offices that might need us? So provided they like the services you're providing, that's going to be your best way to increase what you're doing. Let's familiarize ourselves with a couple basic tools and websites that you are going to be able to use to do this type of work. So what we're looking at, if you're watching YouTube, this is sam.gov. Sam.gov is the official repository for all of the opportunities that are going to be, not all of, most of the opportunities that are going to be released. And it's also going to be where you register your business if you need to register your business. And there's a variety of other things you can do with this. Is the website good? It's better than FedBizOps used to be. So this is which is what this was a few years back, but it's still not, it's not the best, but you can use this. If you don't have anything else, you can use this. I like to use different tools that you pay for, right? And one that's not going to break the bank is GovTribe. This is GovTribe right here. I like GovTribe a lot because I can do a lot with it. It's not super expensive, at least for their initial offerings. And I can find opportunities on here. I can do some basic government research on here. Another free website for research, I'm going to start with the research, is usaspending.gov. I've talked about this on the website before. usaspending.gov, this is going to give you an idea of who you're targeting. I like to know what agencies I'm targeting. And frankly, I like to have one that I'm starting off with to build opportunities. Now, a lot goes into this, right? You guys already have past performance and you're working with different agencies. So you need to do some research within the company and decide where you're going to focus, because I always start with a customer. But if you're starting from scratch, if they're just saying, hey, we just want new customers, new offices that we're working with, you could start here for free and do some research. So this is usaspending.gov. And what I would do is, let's see here. Under all fiscal years. So essentially, if anyone's listening to this, you can go into usaspending.gov. You can click years of spending. I'm looking at government spending over different periods of time. You could go back as far as 2008 with this date range, but look, what the government bought in 2008 is going to be different than today. So I want to know, hey, in the past couple of years, what agencies are buying what I sell. So now the key is going to be, we need to figure out a fast way to look at some of the things that you're selling. So you said services, you mentioned HR, right? So we got I'm looking at NAICS codes. Do you remember North American Industry Classification Codes?
Yeah, and there's certain NAICS codes we work with.
Okay, so do you know what those are?
I have a list, but I don't have them. I don't have it available to me right now. Okay. If we paused, I can grab a couple.
Okay, so I mean, just as far as this is concerned, this is just a tutorial essentially on what you're going to search for. So you can pull the actual ones later. You can see here that we have data processing services. We have other information services. Some of these aren't going to apply to you. Legal services may or may not, tax prep services, payroll services. But you can see just by typing services in, I'm getting the NAICS codes that cover a lot of different types of services. Human resources consulting services, maybe something that you guys do. Let's check this one. Okay. So essentially now by checking that, I'm just looking at what is the government spending, or what does the government spending look like from fiscal year 20, and the fiscal year for the government starts October 1st and ends at the end of September, to fiscal year 23, which we're in now. These searches aren't perfect. There's a lag in reporting. So, if I look at FY21's numbers only today, I would bet if I look at it next week, they're going to be slightly different, right? And that's because, of a lag in reporting. That's because some agencies aren't reporting like they should be. And then there's just system things that I'm unaware of. I just know that number can change, but big picture, it's going to tell us what we want to know. Okay, so we ran that search. Sometimes, by the way, it's a government system. Sometimes this thing works great, and sometimes there is a nice lag when you hit submit search. But I just searched for those services. And over time, it's going to tell me for that NAICS code. And by the way, what you guys sell is going to be in a variety of NAICS codes, right? And in each of these NAICS codes, they're really broad. So there's going to be stuff in there that you guys don't do. And you're just going to have to look at each NAICS code and kind of understand. And then later, when you're really digging into the contracts in here and see, hey, are these contracts the kind of contracts that we're actually engaging on? So you might have to, it's an art form. You have to look at a lot of different codes, NAICS, PSC, product service codes, but this will give you a good start. I just ran the search. It says FY20, 714 million spent, 21, 779 million, 22, 860 million. And then in 2023, so far, 624 million has been reported. I would imagine that, if we look at this number next winter, it'll probably be higher than FY22. Okay, so that's telling you spending. I want to know big picture, who's doing the spending. So I can see here that Department of Defense is at the top, right? So they've spent $1.1 billion in that NAICS code as reported today. Today is August 2nd, 2023. So as of today, $1.1 billion since FY20 for this NAICS code, which is, what is it? NAICS code, Professional Scientific and Technical Services 5.4, followed by Department of Homeland Security. Now, this is what we'll get with USA Spending. It will give us the sub-agencies, but that's pretty much is the best it's going to do, right? So the Army is spending a crap load of money, 966 million. So of, that 1.1 billion, the Army is doing most of the spending. So when I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, initially it looks like the Department of the Army is a good place to target, followed by TSA, spent 427 million, followed by the VA. Some things to think about. With the VA, they award a lot of contracts to veteran-owned businesses, service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. There are tools you can use to really dive in deep. So when I do a strategy for a business, I'm using a lot of different analytical tools to figure out, okay, and you can use USA Spending to do some of this. Does the Army, if you were a small business, I would want to know, I would run this exact same search only for small businesses. And that's probably going to change who I'm selling to, because some agencies you'll see, will award more to big businesses. Some will award more to small businesses. If you're a woman-owned small business, you can search for that. I'm assuming you're a large business that you're working for. Is that a good assumption or a bad assumption?
No. We're a small business.
You are, okay. So under 500 employees, and
that's correct.
Probably under 20 million, 25 million in revenue each year. Okay, no, that's good to know. So let's run the exact same search. And what we'll say now is I can look at recipient type. And it says here, business. Do you guys have any special designations? Woman-owned small business, veteran-owned small business?
Women-owned small business.
Oh, you are? Okay, excellent. So when I click on the women-owned business, I can now click over here under woman-owned small business. What this is showing is we just ran this under woman-owned small business. And Department of Defense Army is still at the top of the list. But of course, the number is decreased. So we saw that they had roughly, close to $1 billion. It was just under $1 billion. Oh, sorry. DoD was over $1 billion. Army was almost, it was most of it, right? Well, here we can see for woman-owned small businesses, for that NAICS code, the Army awarded $251.4 million, which is a lot, right? So, I mean, that's a quarter of the contracts, according to this, went to woman-owned small businesses. That's really interesting. And if I look at sub-agencies, I can say here, it's the Army was $200 million of that. But the next one down was, what was it? DHS and was it Homeland Security and TSA that were the next two? You can see that changed. Now it's the Office of the Secretary and OPM, Office of Personnel Management. Okay, so that changed who your top three are. It's just going to give you a good idea. So now I'm thinking Army, Office of Secretary. Again, a lot more needs to go into this, Craig, but this just to give you an idea where's the money.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a facility clearance, security clearances?
Certain people do. Yeah.
Okay. So you may, and this is something that we can talk about it offline, but that could also affect who you're targeting, right? So if you have the ability to provide cleared personnel or work on cleared projects, the Army is going to probably have a lot of, contracts that require something like that. So we just want to know that going into it. Okay, so now we have an idea of the agencies that we're going to be targeting. So I'm just going over the free tools for you. SAM.gov, here you can, so you may have to get an account. Actually, I don't think you do need an account to actually look for contract opportunities. Let's try searching. For those of you listening, I'm on SAM.gov now. So I've just switched from USA Spending.gov to SAM.gov. And we just want to look at how to find opportunities using a free tool. I just put that in there to get to like the real, I call it the real search screen. Again, I don't use SAM.gov when I'm searching for things. I use GovTribe. You can use something called Govly. So SAM.gov shows you a lot of, most of the opportunities that are out there, but something else, since you're selling to the government, does your company have a GSA schedule? Does your company have other contract vehicles? Those vehicles, if you remember, are essentially you apply to be on GSA. Some of them you compete to be on, some contract vehicles. NASA SOUP is a good example. And all that is, it's a way for the government, it's called category management. It's a way for the government to award companies without having to do a really big competition every single time. So the big competition might be putting a contract vehicle together, right? So if it's the Ricky Howard contract vehicle coming out of my, when I was in the Air Force doing this, I might put a vehicle together for IT services because I know over the next 3 years, I'm going to have to award a crap load of contracts to companies to do various IT things from my agency and others or other offices. So instead of having to do a competition every time, I might say, hey, I'm putting this contract vehicle together. It has $100 million ceiling, and these are the services. It's probably pretty broad. And then I might get 100 companies that apply to be on this. That's a big competition. It might take 1.5 years to actually get it awarded. But at the end, I might have whittled that down to 10 companies that are on that vehicle. And now I don't have to have a public competition every time I award somebody. So I might be putting awards on that you'll never see on SAM.gov. Same thing with GSA, same thing with these others. So how do you see those opportunities? Just make a mental note. You can use a tool called Govly that you have to pay for. And that's a great way of, because companies will put their listings on there. So if companies on a huge contract vehicle, because some of these have 100 companies on there, they might put something on Govly that says, we need a company that does HR services. And, through them, you can partner with them. It's a way of subcontracting with primes. That was a side note. So chasing rabbits. SAM.gov, back to like the main repository. So you want to build, there's a lot of different ways to build your initial pipeline. I just want to show you initially what you're looking for. So the first thing you mentioned to me that, when you're looking for opportunities, you're kind of overwhelmed on the government side with what you're looking at. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you were seeing there?
A flurry of information because I'm set up to receive kind of like automatic updates of postings relative to certain NAICS codes. And so, when I look at those, it's just kind of like, sifting through all of them to, see if there's, something within all of that is appropriate for me to kind of throw into the pipeline.
No, that makes sense. What I'm going to start off by looking at is sources sought. So you may remember from previous conversations, you're not looking for an RFP, because if you're looking for an RFP, that means that a lot of work has already gone into this by companies that are going to bid. The RFP, think of the RFP, the handcuffs are on the government, and they are now requesting proposals from companies. They already know what is, you have to bid on, right? All the requirements are set, the money's set. They've already done their market research, and that's key. The law prohibits the government from having special conversations with you or other businesses once that solicitation's out, because now it's an official solicitation from the government. They can't show any favoritism, right, or preferential treatment. That's where we get protests from. But there is a place for you to engage, and that's called the market research phase. So you want to focus on the market research phase. You want to focus on what comes before an RFP or a RFQ, request for proposal or request for quote. I don't let my clients bid on those or even look at them unless we've spent time talking with the office ahead of time so they know who we are. And usually we've helped shape those opportunities. So you want to help shape those solicitations. So we need to look for pre-solicitations. We need to look for requests for information and something called a sources sought.
Now, if you're looking for RFIs, pre-solicitation, and sources sought, though, like you're really looking out far into the future. So this is a pipeline where there's like no immediate wins.
Yes, you're correct. There is no immediate win.
So there are, is it an accurate, which statement is accurate? There are or there are not, ways to truncate the moment from which a salesperson doing B2G begins prospecting to the close of business. There just simply aren't, right?
I would not have in your mind, your mindset has to be, this is the long game. You are not going to be on contract with the government next month. There's nothing you're going to do to put you on contract with the government next month. Because think about this, right? And this is true right now, right? The deals that I'm working right now, and this is true when I was on the government side. I have opportunities where I already have a contract with the government. I have the relationship. The government has said, I'm going to buy X from you. I have the money. I have the contract. And it's still going to take me 3 months to close that deal. Why? Because even though they're ready, there's 10 people that can say no and delay everything, right? There's not one person in the government that can say yes, like you can with B2B sales.
Right.
I can say yes. I can decide to buy something for my business today, and I can get someone to say yes and buy something from me. In the government, you can get the best you're going to get is the program manager to say yes, I want to buy from you. Now they need a way to put you on contract that's legal, right? And that's probably either a competition or a contract that you already have with them. Let's take your current customers, which are going to be the fastest way for you to go on contract. If your company has a contract with the Air Force, if they have a contract with C3INN and Hanscom Air Force Base for services, and you get the program manager to say, yes, because you had a conversation, yeah, I could use this project. You recommend something you guys do. Or, we could use, a halftime FTE for one of your people for 3 months, right? And let's say that's $100,000 project. Well, that's great. And maybe they have the money and they have the contract. Even if they're ready to go right now, you have to have that conversation. If they were ready to go right now, you'd still struggle to get that on contract 30 days from now. It'd still probably take 2 months. I'd still probably put it out 2 months because it takes a while once they say yes. So, but you don't have that right now. If you're starting from scratch, you need to find an opportunity, right? Let's say you found an RFP that you're going to engage on, and just for the sake of, even though I told you not to do that. Well, that RFP, let's say the response was due in a month. You have to, first of all, put a huge proposal together, or even a small one takes a lot of time. They take that a month from now. then they're going to review those. You might not even know till 4 months from now who the winner is. Let's just say that you won. Let's say 1% chance that you won without doing anything before that, or maybe nobody else bid on it. Even once you win, it still has to go on contract. That's not a closed sale for you until, the money hits the bank, right? So it could still be a couple months after that before you actually have a contract. So does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so you want to find things as early as possible, okay? And there are some things that we can do. We can talk about like the faster things, but those are your current customers to start with. And then there are things called other transaction authority, which are a lot faster. Okay, so we just ran a search on SAM.gov, and it says 5.4 under the NAICS code that we talked about. And you can see that here. So these are sources sought. Looks like these were all due already, July 27th. We can put a parameter in, at least with the tools that I normally use, that will be, for instance, and this is why I like to use other tools, because when I'm searching for RFI sources sought, I'm going to put something like offers due within the next 3 months, right? And that's going to eliminate some of the chaff. Now, does this mean you can't engage on these? No, because these aren't RFPs. These are sources sought, right? So let's say that this human resources support services one with the Army Contracting Command was something you wanted to engage on. Response was due on July 27th. Today is August 2nd. Can you still submit a response? Yeah. No, you can.
So you can. Okay.
With sources sought and RFIs, it's not the same rules. RFPs, when you actually put a proposal in that you're going to be awarded a contract on if you win, those are excruciatingly precise. Yeah. If you submit late, you're done. If you don't write the proposal the way they asked you to do it, you're done. And we could talk about proposals later. But with RFIs and source sought, this is market research. This is the government saying, hey, I've got this human resources support services contract coming up, and I need to figure out how I'm going to write the solicitation. I'm trying to figure out, what certifications should the guys have? What past performance? There's a lot you can recommend. You're recommending to the government what they should do in the proposal when you respond to one of these. Now, they might be getting a lot of responses. They might not. So if I never recommend submitting late, but you can if you submit late on this, you're probably just going to get an acknowledgement like, hey, we got it. Now your goal, Craig, is with sources sought and RFIs is you're recommending things that your company does, answer their questions. If they ask for something you don't do, I usually don't even bother answering that, or I will say that we have a partnership that will cover that. But I'm recommending things. If I have a woman-owned small business, right? You can recommend that they set this aside for a woman-owned small business. And what does that do for you? Well, that eliminates a ton of competition. Anyone that's not a woman-owned small business, right? If you have a GSA schedule, I recommend you put this on GSA. So there's a lot you could do. We can get into that. And I have other training on what to put into an RFI or sources sought response. But now, if I was going to engage on this with you, you would write up a quick, even though we're late, if it's perfect for you, you might write a quick response, send that to them. If it was on time, even better and preferable. And then your next thing is, once they have it, now you've sent something in, I'm requesting a meeting. So I'm using this to get my foot in the door. I want to have actual meetings. Your job is to get meetings. If you one takeaway for anyone listening, for you, your job is to get meetings with offices that can buy what you are selling, that are authorized to buy what you're selling, have funding, and have a need. This is one way to do that. Okay.
And I think from a sales perspective, right? Like anybody who's in a sales role, if you're getting meetings, right? Like you're accomplishing the task, right? Because like if this is a 12 to 18 month sales process or longer, right? In the absence of making the sale, activity is what matters, right? And you're showing the activity of doing the right things to kind of shape the opportunity. So, like for me, like getting the meeting is would be really meaningful. Two quick questions I have regarding the RFI, process. If you if you submit an RFI, does that, if you reply to an RFI, does that have a positive or bearing or no bearing at all? I can't imagine that it would have a negative bearing, but does that have a positive bearing or a neutral bearing on your success with respect to responding to an RFP? And as a secondary question, if you miss replying to an RFI, but then you subsequently see the RFP released, can you still reply to the RFP had you not replied to the RFI?
Okay, so one of the points of this drill, you want to respond to the RFI before the RFP. If an RFI is issued, you want to respond to it because your whole goal is respond to the RFI. If it's well written, it's going to influence what goes into the actual solicitation. And hopefully you can then get in a meeting with whoever is doing the hiring. You can't always do that, but you're trying to do that. By the time the solicitation comes out, they know who you are. They might have met with you. You might have done a demo with them. Hell, you might even get a sole source contract depending on how good you are in that pre-solicitation phase. But most likely you're not getting a sole source contract. You're going into competition. You're much more likely to win. If you miss that, and you're going to, because nobody, you would have to have a huge team not to see everything. And by the way, also every RFP doesn't have an RFI associated with it. So, but the RFP you can submit without having submitted to the RFI. Your odds of winning are not so hot. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Many companies have tried and failed to sell to the government because they were only going after RFPs. And most companies I know that have succeeded are firmly in the market research phase, finding out about opportunities before their competitors or influencing them, and then going after the win. I did find where to put NAICS code. It's under this product or service information. So you can see that right there. Now, if we add, there's a lot of different things out here. We could add, I'm looking at sources sought and pre-solicitation. And there's only 5 opportunities right now that are popping up. So this is a learning management systems services contract. It may or may not be good for your company. This is with Department of Energy, DOE. We can see this is solicitation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's due on the 11th. Now, if I'm looking at this, what's it telling me? It's telling me a lot of information, how they're going to award it, how they're going to award subcontract. It's going to have a bunch of attachments here that you can look at. What's the schedule look like? But here's the thing. You need to set up meetings, right? Who's this person? Well, now you have a procurement specialist. You have this person's all of the contact information, right? So you go into sam.gov, or whatever tool you're using. I wouldn't use sam.gov because you're getting automated updates, right? Well, those automated updates you're getting, it's probably a paid tool that your company has purchased. It might be GovWinIQ. Hopefully it is. I think that's probably the best there is. And then it is sending you something based on a search, right? But you have the contact information. So that's how you set up meetings. But the best way, you don't want to just cold, and I've tried this, right? And I've been the victim of this on the government side. You can't just set up an email campaign to government people and expect to get anywhere. In fact, that could have the exact opposite effect of what you want. You want to understand their problem set. And that's why I like to look at RFIs and stuff like that. Understand the problem set, understand how you can help solve their problem. And now you're reaching out in a thoughtful way to tell them how you can help solve the problem. Hey, can I get a couple minutes? When you get on the phone with someone, there's no better way to determine if you're really in the running for something than to talk to them, talk about your experience. And you can get an idea. Do they have somebody in mind for this? Is there an incumbent? If you use GovWinIQ, it's going to tell you if they're tracking this opportunity, it's going to tell you if there's an incumbent. And it's going to also show you the entire history of the solicitation, which is why GovWinIQ, so one of the reasons it's good, it'll show me the timeline. So it might show me, like for this one, this is a solicitation. But I bet if this is a substantial opportunity, I bet there was an RFI that came out. And it'll show you. There might have been multiple. Sometimes multiple RFIs or sources sought or come out. So, companies may have been engaging on this for the past year and a half, trying to get a leg up. And then one more thing I'll show you. You're a woman-owned small business. We can look. I'm going to get rid of that NAICS code. I am going to look for stuff that's already set aside for woman-owned small businesses. And by the way, woman-owned small business is an official certification process. You can self-declare when the company registers, but there's an official woman-owned small business certification that you have to get through the SBA. So make sure they have that. That takes like 6 months. That's not a hand wave. So you're not a woman-owned small business just because you're the person who owns 51% of the business is a woman. For this, you're a woman-owned small business if you've been through that certification process. Same with service disabled, a veteran-owned small business. You get that through the SBA. This was a very quick and dirty, like how you're going to look for some of these things. Now, we just looked at one NAICS code, right? So what I would start doing to build opportunities, first, I would start using the different NAICS codes that you have and start searching through what you think makes sense for you. You could search by agency as well. You could search by keyword, It's kind of an art form. And depending on the tool, some tools are better than others at looking at that. Look for things that aren't solicitations. I would start with RFIs and sources sought. The next thing that you could do is you could start looking at, basically, I would look at the small business offices associated with those agencies that we said were going to be your target, right? The Department of the Army is huge. And so there's a lot here I want to know. I want to know like what offices within the Army are actually doing the purchasing here. We might be able to get a little, if we look at the actual contracts, if you have Government IQ, it'll tell you, hey, it is Aberdeen Proving Ground. It is Army Corps of Engineers in California, right? You're gonna be able to know. And that's powerful because you could then go to the Army Corps of Engineers small business page and see, do they have meetings that you can schedule? Do they have any conferences coming up? That's another great way to actually talk to a live person. Hold on. Right now I'm searching through actual contract awards on USA Spending to see if we can find a little bit more information as far as what office might be making the award. Here I have a screen that says agency details. Still, it's just telling me awarding agency. Sometimes what you can do is take this, because this code, here it says Fort Knox and MIC Fort Knox. I might just take this and plug it into Google and see what it tells me. It's also telling me the funding office, Department of the Chief of Staff, G1. All right, I just plugged that in and it gave me Mission and Installation Contracting Command, Fort Knox. And it's telling me everything about, not everything, but it's giving me an overview because you want to know who you're talking to and who you're reaching out to, right? So sure. Mission and Installation Contracting Command, what do they do? Here's their mission, here's their vision. What do? They provide installations, activities, and disciplined responsive contracting solutions and oversight. So this could be probably for the Army, because in the military, I'll speak for the Air Force because that's where I came from. We have acquisitions professionals. Very few people will actually be able to buy anything from you in the government. I would imagine, I'm guessing that it's less than 1%. The only person that can actually award you a contract is a warranted contracting officer. And a warranted contracting officer is not the person who runs the project, but they are the person with the legal authority to commit funds on behalf of the US government. So think about it. I've used this before and I stole it from another podcast I listened to. I think it's called the Contracting Officer Podcast. It's a good one if anyone's listening to this. But what you could do is, so contracting officer is the priest of the wedding. The way they described it in the program manager, which is what I was, and that's what I was, they described that as the bride, right? So the bride is essentially trying to decide who she's going to marry, and those are all of the grooms. The grooms are all the businesses that want to marry the bride, right? And so that program manager or the bride is in charge of something. It's HR solutions, and she has to put a contract together for HR solutions. So she has all the companies that know what they're doing know that she's looking to find somebody. So they're trying to take her on dates, set up meetings, sending her love letters, everything, right? So that's what all the grooms are doing ahead of time. If you're just submitting a proposal, it's almost like you're showing up the day of the wedding, and she's already met, 30 grooms and kind of made her choice already. But anyway, so that bride. So when I was a program manager, I usually knew, I had a good idea at least what companies could do what I wanted them to do before that solicitation ever came out. In fact, they would help me write it. I would take pieces of information from them. So once I knew that, then I would work with the contracting officer, right? Hey, this is what I need the solicitation to look like. They put the legal stuff in there. They do the competition. I may or may not be involved with selecting who's going to. I certainly had a lot to do with it, but if there's a big review, then there'll be a team of people that score the proposals. And then the contracting officer commits funds on behalf of the government and puts your company on contract. But then they back off, right? They're just putting companies on contract. Now the bride, the program manager, they're the ones you're working with, and they own your destiny. So you want to talk to them ahead of time. You want to work with them after, because they know what's coming up. Their job is to take the government has a problem and we have money and we need to fix it. And they have to figure out how to do that. And then they use a contracting officer to put you on contract. So two different skill sets. Going back to this Army Fort Knox MIC website, one of the things I'm looking for when I go to a website like this is there a way in for me, right? So I'm just looking at their, the menu here or the directory, I guess you could say. I want to know if there is a small business office. I'm looking through those solutions. Nothing's popping out at me right now. That doesn't mean there isn't one.
Does every government agency have a small business office?
Usually several, like sometimes like an acquisitions base will have one just for that base. And then the Air Force might have an overall small business office. Army. So now I'm just Googling Army MIC, MICC, small business office. I've got to hop off here in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Okay, so here what popped up is small business office, Army Contracting Command. So it's going to be a higher level small business office, but that's fine. And here what we've got, and this is another way to find those opportunities, Craig, acquisitions forecast. All right, so when you have a targeted agency, if I click on this, I'm probably going to get a spreadsheet that has a bunch of opportunities on it. And I'm going to open it up right now because that's exactly what it is. This is what popped up. So you can see that, right? And so this is going to have a lot of things. It has contract value. So we talked about this, right? Like, hey, how are you going to predict, like, how are you going to get that $5 million in pipeline, right? Well, one way to do that is if you're looking at an acquisitions forecast and they have valued the contract there, and it's going to change, right? They're just taking a guess, or maybe it's based on the last contracts, or it could be more or less. And then you can search through, because there are NAICS codes in here. You can see right here. Bam. Here's a $5.5 million contract. It's this internship program. It may or may not apply to what you're doing. Oh, so yeah. Oh, you can see here too, this is set aside for an 8A business. So if you wanted to go after this, if you looked at it and you're like, hey, this makes sense for us, then you would have to partner with an 8A to get it, because you're not 8A. At least I don't think you are. Again, you're going to have other NAICS codes. So you're going to see stuff in here that, also makes sense for you guys. You can see here this program management, programmatic support services. This is a huge contract, right? So this is probably providing a ton of people to a base to do PM work, program management work. Blanket purchase agreement. Again, this is something. So I would go in there. I would start taking a look at stuff like that. I would look through the website like this. So I'm back on the small business website. This may give you, look at AMC, small business offices. So it's giving you different small business offices to reach out to. And a lot of these will also give you a way to set up a meeting, or at least go to a initial, hey, this is what our command does. This is how we recommend you go after different opportunities. Make sense?
Sure. One thing
look at this.
before
Look
I
at
know,
this. Small business appointment request. I would go to this website and set up a meeting.
where's that? I'm not seeing it. Oh, right in front of me.
Yep, small business appointment request. Download this
And
form.
does that need to be tied to a specific opportunity, or can you just make such a request to go in and introduce yourself?
Not this one. You can, this is a small business appointment request. So I would fill out the form and submit. But what I would do is I would take a good look at that, that opportunity forecast and find a couple things on there that you're interested in, and maybe look and see if there are contracts that exist that they're just replacing. Is it a new opportunity? It might even say in the spreadsheet, new opportunity, old opportunity, etc. There's a good way to start building that pipeline. Okay. We have a minute left. Has this been helpful for you today?
Absolutely. Very, very, very enlightening.
Great. So go ahead.
One quick question, if I could, in the last minute. You mentioned not only these small business offices, but you also use the word conferences to go to and introduce yourself to people. What such conferences would come to mind? That
is a research drill you're going to have to do. I don't waste my time with conferences unless I know that it is a agency that I'm targeting that's having the conference. I like to go to conferences that are sponsored by the government, not by okay. I shouldn't say that I don't go to commercially sponsored conferences, because a lot of times the commercial, or businesses, there's usually a ton of sponsors, but there are conferences out there where what you'll see is it's all industry and a couple of government people speaking, right? Hey, this person's speaking, this person's speaking. That's great. Kind of a waste of time unless you're going to have a subcontracting only approach. I want to go to conferences. For me personally, I like to go to ones that are very heavy in government attendance. AFCEA does sponsor some of those where you'll get some good government participation, but I would look at the commands. You can go to a meeting like this and ask them, hey, are there any conferences that you guys sponsor? A good one that I like is, Air Force Mobility Command has the ATA, it's the Tanker Airlift Symposium or conference that they have every year. And everybody loves to go to it. I mean, it's a party for all of the mobility guys. And so what you get there, by contrast to a mainly industry and a few government people event, you go to ATA and you have an industry showroom floor where you have all your, booths and all of that, but you have thousands of military that are going to conferences all day long. And then at night they are drinking and they're playing ping pong and, squash ball, whatever the hell they're playing in the back there. They have bands and, it's good for me as a former military. I see a lot of people there that I used to know. But what's awesome for you is you get in one place, I'm getting the users who can't buy what you sell, but the users might see what you sell and say, hey, this is great. You're getting some contingent of acquisitions folks who actually could put you on contract. Then you're getting requirements people. So those are, I think, in the military, colonel level people that actually are in charge of pots of money, in charge of deciding what the users need and if they're going to spend money on it. And you also get like very senior leader. Last time I was at this, we had COCOM commanders, which, these are very high ranking generals in charge of combatant command. So, and all of these people, getting all of that in one place is very rare. So being able to do that, you could have a user say, that's awesome. Talk to the requirements person. That's great. We want that. Talk to the acquisitions folks. We can put you on contract. Let's set up a meeting next week. Right. I mean, that whole process could take you 8 months if you hadn't gone to that contract. That contract. Right. So, all right, I've got to run.
Yes,
my recommendation for you is do that research drill specific to your NAICS codes. Start checking out the websites associated with each of the commands that you would be targeting. And I would start building a pipeline of, for starters, probably $5 million, but you don't want just one opportunity. That's $5 million. You want multiple opportunities. And then you're looking for things that are like RFIs and sources sought. When you're on SAM.gov, you can review acquisitions forecasts and you can start setting up meetings. I think that's probably enough for you to go on right now.
Thank you very much.
Cool, man. All right. And I'm going to stop recording here in a second. Thanks everyone for checking out DoD Contract Academy this week. Head on over to dodcontract.com if you want to learn step-by-step the process from registering your business all the way to closing contracts. Join DoD Contract Academy, watch our modules, build your pipeline, start engaging, winning those contracts. We will see you next week.